The snow wasn't falling. It was attacking, sharp. Fast flakes hit Jake's jacket like tiny knives. The wind howled louder than any animal. It wasn't just cold. It felt wrong. Jake knew this planet was cold, but this was different. He had survived snowstorms before, even on icy planets, but this storm wasn't natural. It came too fast, too thick, too cruel. He wrapped his thermal jacket tighter and checked his scanner. The weather alert was red, blinking fast, extreme. Hazard, it said. No kidding. He turned to head back to his small shelter, a dome-shaped pod dug into the snow. But just as he took one step, he heard it, a sound soft and weak. Like a whisper carried by the wind, he stopped, listened. There it was again, a voice faint and broken, like someone calling. Crying, Jake looked at the storm, then at the direction of the sound. It was stupid, it was risky, but he couldn't ignore it. He turned away from the safety of his shelter and walked toward the sound. Every step was a fight. The wind pushed him back. Snow blinded his eyes, but he kept going. 10 meters, 20, 30. Then he saw something. A shape, small and still, half buried in the snow. His heart jumped. He ran, dropped to his knees, and brushed away the white. It was a girl, not human. Purple skin, soft, glowing veins, long fingers with sharp nails. Her body was thin, shaking. Lips blue, she was alive, but barely. Then he heard another sound, a second voice. Even weaker, he turned and saw another one, just a few feet away. Another alien girl. Same features, same glowing skin. Two of them. Jake acted fast. He pulled off his coat and wrapped it around the first one. Then lifted the second in his arms. She was light, too light, like a bird about to break. "I got you," he whispered. Even though they didn't understand his words, they looked at him with wide, frightened eyes. And that was enough. He ran back toward his shelter, the snow now like a wall. His boots sank deep, his lungs burned, but he made it, slammed the pod door shut, locked it tight, inside. It was still cold, but safe. He laid the girls on the heated bed panels, turned the heat to full, grabbed every blanket, every cloth. He wrapped them, rubbed their arms. Tried to wake them. One of them opened her eyes first. She gasped. Tried to speak, but no words came. Jake smiled gently. "You're safe now," he said. The second girl stirred next. She looked around in panic, but when she saw her sister and Jake, she relaxed. Tears ran down her cheeks, freezing halfway before melting from the heat. They didn't speak English, but they understood safety, understood warmth, understood kindness. Jake gave them water, little by little. Fed them protein gel, warmed their hands with his own. They never stopped staring at him. Not with fear, but with something else. Wonder, confusion, hope. Hours passed, the storm still roared outside, shaking the walls. Jake stayed awake, watching. Them, they huddled close together. But now with his jacket over both, he had so many questions. Where did they come from? Why were they outside in a death storm with no gear? Were they lost? Escaped? But he didn't ask, not yet. First, they had to survive the night. He sat near the heater, eyes heavy, body tired. The older sister, he guessed she was the older one, right? Alton touched his arm. Her skin was cool, soft, trembling. She looked into his eyes and said something in her language. He didn't understand the words, but the way she said them made his chest tighten. Then the younger one, barely able to sit, reached up and placed her hand on his. They were both looking at him now, not like a stranger, but like someone who had saved their world. Jake didn't move, didn't speak. He just held their hands until they both fell asleep, safe, warm, and alive for now. Outside, the snow screamed, but inside, the small shelter, something silent and powerful had already begun. Something more than rescue. Something more than survival. Jake had no idea what tomorrow would bring, but one thing was already clear. These sisters weren't going to let him go. When the storm finally died, it was still dark. The sky above the frozen planet was always gray, always heavy, but inside Jake's shelter, a quiet warmth had returned. The two alien girls were still sleeping. Wrapped in layers of blankets, Jake hadn't moved much during the night. He stayed close, keeping the heat steady and checking their breathing. He hadn't saved people before, not like this. He was just a mechanic who worked with outpost crews. Not a hero, not a fighter, just a man trying to survive. But now, two alien girls were alive because he made a choice, because he ran into the storm. Because he didn't leave them to die like others might have. He stood, stretched his arms, and turned to check the supply pod. They had 2 more days of food if he rationed carefully. Water was fine. He could melt ice from the cave system nearby. But still, this situation wasn't easy. He heard movement. Jake turned quickly, ready in case they panicked, but what he saw surprised him. The older sister was awake. She didn't scream or cry. She simply stared at him with wide, violet eyes. Unmoving, Jake stepped closer slowly, palms open. "It's okay," he said softly. "You're safe now." She blinked, tilted her head. Then she did something strange. She placed her hand flat against her chest, then reached it out to him. A gesture, slow and careful, like a sign of respect, before Jake could respond. The younger sister stirred beside her. She opened her eyes, coughed, then grabbed her sister's arm. The older one nodded and whispered something. The younger looked at Jake and immediately covered her mouth. Shocked, she looked terrified. But not in the way someone fears danger. No, her expression looked more like shame. Jake crouched down and offered a small water pack. "Drink," he said, slow. The older one took it, sniffed it, then handed it to the younger girl. The way she mowed, gentle, protective, made it clear who was in charge. Jake watched as both drank carefully, not spilling a drop. Then it happened. The older girl reached into the blankets and pulled out a small silver charm. She held it in her hand and suddenly began to hum, softly, deeply. Like a prayer, the humming grew louder. The younger sister joined in, together. Their voices created a sound that filled the shelter with something ancient and powerful. Jake's chest felt tight, not from fear, but from emotion. The song ended. The older girl stood, weak but proud. She looked at Jake with tears in her glowing eyes, then dropped to one knee and bowed her head. Jake froze. What are you doing?" he asked, confused. The younger sister followed, bowing too. Then the older one finally spoke in broken, trembling English. "You warm," she said, pointing to him. "You, Stormwalker. You." "Godheart," Jake blinked. "Godheart, Stormwalker." What were they talking about? The older girl reached out and touched his chest. Her fingers trembled as they rested over his heart. "Only one came," she said. "Only you." Jake swallowed hard. He didn't feel like a hero. He didn't feel like a god, but to them, he was everything. Later that day, Jake taught them how to use the heater, how to hold a cup of hot tea. They watched every move he made like it was sacred. Even when he showed them how to open a protein pack, they stared as if it were magic. They didn't stop thanking him, not with words, but with their actions, helping, watching, never leaving his side. When he went outside to gather ice, they both waited at the door when he came back. They smiled like he'd returned from war. That night, as they all sat by the heat vent, Jake looked at them closely. Their faces were no longer pale, their bodies still thin but stronger. He asked, "What are your names?" The older sister tapped her chest. Jayla, the younger one, smiled shyly. "Kiri, Jayla, and Kiri," Jake repeated. They smiled when he said it, as if hearing their names in his voice meant something special. Then Jayla leaned in and pointed at his chest. Her voice was soft but steady. Now? Yo. No, alone. Jake looked at her, at Kiri, at the strange storm outside that brought them together, and he realized something. Maybe the snow wasn't natural. Maybe it was fate. The days passed slowly. Outside the shelter, the cold world remained silent and gray. Inside, something warm was growing. Not just heat, but trust. Jake taught Jala and Kiri how to cook the ration packs. He showed them how to use the light panel, how to purify snow, how to scan for threats. Every time he explained something, they listened like children hearing a story, but their eyes were far too old for their age. He didn't ask about their past, not yet. They still looked away whenever he brought up where they had come from, who left them in the storm, why they were out there to begin with. But today felt different. Today, they were ready. Jake had just returned from the ice cave with 2 water packs. He stomped snow off his boots, set the gear down. Jayla was already waiting. She sat near the heater, her silver eyes watching his every move. Kiri sat beside her, quiet, holding a small stone charm between her hands. When Jake knelt to refill the purifier, Jayla crawled closer and touched his arm. Talk now, she said, voice slow but firm. Jake nodded. Okay. He sat down across from them. Ready to listen, Jayla took a long breath, her fingers clenching. Kiri closed her eyes tightly, as if the memory hurt. We had family, Jayla began. Many. Once, Jake leaned forward, staying quiet. Jayla looked at the wall like she could see the past through it. We were daughters of ruling house, she said, not big empire. Small moon, then why were you alone? Jake asked gently. Jayla's jaw tightened. Kiri spoke now, voice soft war. Jayla nodded. Our people, betrayed, taken, killed. She touched Kiri's shoulder. We run, no ship, no help. Those who promised safety sold us. Jake's heart sank. He had heard stories like this before, but never from someone looking him in the eyes. Jayla said, we escape. Crash on this world, Kiri added, hide in cave. Storm came. Jake frowned. How long were you out there before I found you? Jayla looked down. 3 days. 3 days. No gear, no food, no fire, just the clothes on their back. And each other. Jake shook his head slowly. You should be dead. Jayla looked at him, serious and calm. We would be, but you came. There was silence. Then Jayla reached out and gently held Jake's hand. Her skin was warm now, her grip soft but firm. You save us. Not just life, she whispered. You save soul? Kiri leaned forward, her voice shaky. We have no one. Only you. Jake looked between them, unsure what to say. I just did what anyone would do, he replied. But both sisters shook their heads. No, Jayla said. Others pass, others fear. You did not. Then something strange happened. Jayla stood up slowly and pulled a small silver chain from her pocket. She placed it on Jake's wrist. Kiri brought a second one, made of twisted thread and stone, and tied it to his other hand. Jake stared at them, confused. What is this? Jayla looked serious. You were claimed? Jake blinked. Claimed. Kiri nodded. You are ours now. Jake's voice dropped. Like? Claimed how? Jayla stepped close, so close he could feel the heat from her skin. Bond, she said. Life bond? Jake's breath caught in his chest. He had read about alien cultures that had strange bonding rituals. But he never imagined being part of one. He had never imagined being chosen. I don't understand, he said quietly. Jayla looked him in the eyes, her voice shaking. You saved us. Gave warmth, food, protection. You risked for us. You cared. She paused, then added softly, you are male of heart. You are. Home? Jake looked at the tokens on his wrists. Simple things, metal and string, but they felt heavy now. He didn't feel worthy. He didn't feel like someone to be claimed. But the sisters did, and they weren't backing down that night. They cooked for him, burnt the food a little, laughed about it. They took turns brushing his hair with curious fingers. They sat beside him, not saying much, just being close, and Jake realized something. He wasn't alone anymore either. Not really. The snow outside still whispered, but it no longer sounded empty. Something had changed. And Jake had no idea what would come next, but when Jayla rested her head on his shoulder and Kiri curled up near his leg, he knew one truth. Clear as day, they weren't going to let him go. Jake was sleeping when the alarm went off. The red light blinked on the panel above his bed. A shrill beep filled the small shelter. Something or someone was nearby. He jumped up, grabbing his jacket and rifle. Jayla and Kiri were already awake, their bodies tense. They had excellent hearing, better than his. They felt danger before the scanner confirmed it. Jake checked the screen. Movement 5 figures, approaching fast from the West Ridge. Not animals, not wild bots. Too organized, too straight. Jayla whispered something sharp to Kiri in their language. Kiri responded quickly. Grabbing 2 curved metal pieces from their bag, Jake had seen them use the pieces before small blades. They carried for cutting food or plants. Now they held them like weapons. Stay inside, Jake said, loading his rifle, but Jayla shook her head. No, she said. We fight. Jake frowned. This is my shelter. I'll protect it. You don't need to. You are ours, Jayla said firmly, stepping forward. Anyone come for you, they come for us too. Jake didn't argue further. The 3 of them crouched near the entrance, waiting. The wind had picked up again. Covering their voices outside, the snow fell slow but heavy, hiding the sound of steps. Suddenly, a voice called from outside the shelter. Low male, in broken Earth standard. Come out, it said. We track signal. No harm. Unless you hide them. Jake felt his blood go cold. They weren't here for him. They were here for the sisters. Jayla's fingers tightened on her blade. Kiri's eyes glowed faintly with fear, but she didn't back down. Jake opened the outer door just enough to peek. 5 figures, just as the scanner showed, humanoid, covered in light armor. Holding shock spears and thermal guns, scavenger mercs. By the look of them, raiders. Jake stepped outside, just a little. Rifle raised. You're not welcome here. He shouted, they're under my protection. One of the raiders laughed. A human, protecting runaways. Cute. Then they moved fast, too fast. One raised his arm, ready to fire. But before he could shoot, Jayla was already outside. She jumped low, blade slashing. Her movement was elegant and brutal, like a dancer trained for war. The raider screamed, falling backward. Kiri followed, sliding across the snow. Slashing at the second man's leg, Jake fired at the third one, hitting him in the shoulder. It was chaos sharp, loud, fast. Jayla fought with fury in her eyes. Kiri moved like wind, quick, silent, deadly, but they were outnumbered. Jake took out the 4th raider. But the 5th one struck Kiri hard with the butt of his gun. She dropped to the ground with a cry. Jayla screamed her name and turned, leaving herself open. That was all it took. A shock spear hit Jayla in the back. She crumpled beside her sister. Both of them still, Jake roared and charged, his heart on fire. He tackled the last raider and smashed the rifle into his helmet until the man stopped moving. The snow turned red. The wind fell quiet again. Jake rushed to the girls, falling to his knees. Kiri. Jayla. Kiri groaned. Her arm twisted at a bad angle, but she was awake, alive. Jake turned to Jayla. She wasn't moving. Blood ran from her side. Her breathing was shallow. No, stay with me, he said. Pressing a med patch to her back, she gasped, eyes fluttering. You? Safe? She whispered. Jake nodded quickly, holding her hand. Yes, we're safe. You saved me. Jayla gave a weak smile. Good. Then? Worth it. And passed out. Jake worked fast, using every medkit supply he had. The shelter smelled like blood and burnt metal. But he didn't stop not until Jayla's breathing was steady again. Kiri leaned against him, injured but awake. She live. Jake nodded. Yes, she will. Then Kiri said something that surprised him, something that made his chest feel heavy. She would die for you, she said softly. Me too. Jake looked at her, eyes wide. Why? He asked. Kiri looked at her sister, then at him. Because we have nothing left. But you, outside. The bodies of the raiders began to freeze in the cold, inside. Jake sat between the two alien sisters, one wounded, one bruised, and realized something terrifying. They weren't just bonded to him. They would fight and die for him, because to them, Jake wasn't just a man. He was their only reason to live, and that was a weight he wasn't sure he could carry. The storm had passed again. This time, it left behind more than snow and wind. It left behind silence, deep, heavy silence. Jake sat beside Jayla as she rested, her side wrapped in medic foam. Kiri lay on a folded blanket across the heater. Her arm in a sling, the small shelter had become a battlefield recovery room. And still, Jake had more questions than answers. He couldn't sleep every time he closed his eyes. He saw Jayla falling, blood in the snow. He heard Kiri scream. Felt the weight of her words, we have nothing left but you. Now, with both sisters hurt and quiet, the moment had come. The truth couldn't hide forever. Jake needed to know who they really were and why armed raiders were willing to kill or die just to take them back. He sat across from Kiri, who watched him with tired eyes. Her hair was loose now, long and silver, falling over her face. She looked young, but her expression was not. It was the look of someone who had seen too much. Tell me, Jake said gently. No more hiding. Kiri said nothing at first. Then she sighed, slowly. You want story? Jake nodded. Yes. She looked over at Jayla, then back at him. Long ago. We were daughters of the core flame. Jake blinked. What's that? Kiri's lips trembled. A noble house, from our homeworld, not rich in money. Rich in respect. People listened when our mother spoke. Jake leaned forward, listening carefully. Your mother was a ruler. Kiri nodded. Matron of the third moon of Virel Jala was heir. I was youngest. Jake's heart sank. He hadn't just rescued 2 lost aliens. He had pulled royalty from a grave of snow. Then, why were you alone? He asked. Kiri closed her eyes, voice dropping low. There was peace for many cycles, but a new alliance came. They offered help. Tech, medicine. Jake could guess where this was going, and your family trusted them. Yes, Kiri whispered. Big mistake. She paused, looking toward the fire glow. They poisoned our guards. Burned our home. Mother made us escape at night. Gave us a small ship. She stayed behind to hold them off. Jake swallowed hard. She didn't make it. Kiri shook her head slowly. Jayla moved in her sleep, murmuring softly. In their native tongue, Kiri glanced at her with sorrow. She watched it happen. She said, Jayla saw it all. Mother standing tall. Before fire took her, Jake's throat tightened. He had no idea. No idea they were carrying a weight like that. We ran, Kiri continued, through dark space. But our ship broke, engine failed. We crashed here. No signal. No tools. Jake rubbed his hands together slowly, and the raiders. Kiri's eyes darkened. They followed us. Wanted to return us, not to save us, to sell us. Jake's stomach twisted. Who would buy you? He asked, though part of him already feared the answer. Kiri hesitated, then answered quietly, "Whoever wants a princess with no power. For display, breeding, or breaking." Jake's fist clenched. He looked at Jayla, then back at Kiri. "That's not going to happen," he said, voice low and steady. "Not while I'm alive." Kiri gave him a tired smile. "That is why we chose you," she said. "You protect." Without needing reward, Jake stared at her. "But why did you call me Life Bond? Why the bracelets?" Kiri looked down at her wrist, where a matching piece of thread still clung in our culture. "We bond to the one who saves us without price, only once in life." Jake leaned back, exhaling slowly. "So now, I'm what? A protector. A symbol." Kiri shook her head. "No," she said, eyes meeting his. "You are ours, but also, we are yours, not property. Not duty, family." Jake fell quiet. He thought about Earth, about his lonely job, empty calls home. He thought about how, until that snowstorm, no one had looked at him like he mattered. And now? Two broken alien sisters believed in him. More than he believed in himself that night, when Jayla woke with a weak voice. Jake sat beside her and held her hand. "Sleep," he said. "You're safe now." She smiled slightly, and before closing her eyes again, whispered one word in her language. Jake didn't know the meaning, but it sounded like home. The rescue signal had finally been received. After weeks of silence, Jake's emergency beacon blinked green. Help was coming. A human supply. Ship would land in less than 2 days. He should have felt relief. He should have celebrated instead. His heart felt heavy. The shelter was quiet. The air warmer now. With the heater fixed, Jayla could walk again. Though slowly, Kiri's arm was healing. And she had even started to laugh again. They looked stronger, healthier, alive because of him. But they didn't know. Not yet. Jake hadn't told them. He stood outside that evening, watching the sky. The clouds shifted slowly above the white hills. Soon, a ship would land on that ridge, and he would be taken back to Earth, back to a world where alien princesses didn't need him. He didn't. Notice Jayla behind him until she spoke. "Your eyes." Far away, Jake turned, smiling faintly. "Just thinking." Jayla stepped closer, her hair tied neatly now, her tone careful. "You wait. For something." Jake hesitated, then nodded. "Yes, a ship is coming." Jayla's expression froze. "Ship?" "Yes," he said, "to take me home." She didn't speak, didn't move. Kiri appeared moments later, carrying a bundle of clean tools. When she saw Jayla's face, she paused. "What happened?" Jake sighed. He had to say it. He had to. "Tell them the truth before the ship arrived." "I'm leaving," he said. "The rescue team. They'll bring me back to human space." Kiri slowly lowered the tools. She looked at Jayla, then back at him. "Not us?" she asked, voice almost breaking. Jake opened his mouth, then closed it. He wasn't sure what to say. Could they even survive in human space? Would they be safe there? Jayla stepped forward, eyes blazing. "Why?" she asked. "Why leave?" Jake looked at her, surprised. "I don't belong here," he said. "This isn't my world, you two. You'll be safer if I'm not in the way." Jayla's lips trembled. "You think?" "We want safe without you." Kiri stepped up now, her voice sharp. "We gave bond, we chose you." Jake looked between them, his voice low, and I never asked you to. The words hurt them more than a weapon ever could. Jayla's eyes filled with tears she refused to let fall. Kiri's jaw clenched, her fists shaking. "We live because you pulled us from snow," Jayla said slowly. "We breathe because you've warmed us. We fight because you stayed." Jake stepped back. "This wasn't supposed to happen," he whispered. "I just wanted to help." Kiri stepped forward, pointing to the bracelets on his wrists. You wear those? Not because we force, she said. Because you care. Jake looked down at the thread and silver charms. He had never taken them off, not once, even when he bathed. Even when he cleaned wounds, they stayed on because deep down he couldn't remove them. They'll never let you come with me, Jake said finally. My people. They're scared of aliens, scared of things they don't understand. Jayla held his hand gently. Then we understand them. What if they hurt you? He asked, voice cracking. What if they lock you up, or study you, or worse? Kiri stepped beside him. Then we will run again, she said. But not without you. Jake looked into their eyes that had seen war. Loss, pain, but now held only one truth. They had chosen him, and they weren't going to let him go. When the ship came the next day, the pilot looked confused. Jake stood at the base of the ramp with both alien sisters at his sides. Gayla held his arm. Kiri held his hand. The officer looked at Jake. You're bringing them? Jake nodded firmly. They're with me. The officer hesitated. Command won't like this. Jake shrugged. They can deal with it. The ship rose into the sky. The frozen world shrank below them. Inside the cabin, Kiri curled against Jake's shoulder. Jayla sat on his other side, silent but watching him closely. You still leave? She asked softly. Jake looked at them both, then shook his head. No, he said, voice steady. I'm taking you with me. Jayla smiled. For the first time in days, and Kiri whispered, we are home now. The human ship broke through the clouds of Earth's orbit. The stars above glittered like frozen fire. But all Jake could feel was the weight of what came next. Jayla and Kiri sat beside him, eyes wide at the view outside. Earth was strange. To them blue oceans, green land, golden light, not like the frozen world where they nearly died. Not like their home, which no longer existed. Jake didn't speak much. He was thinking about what would happen once they landed. Officials would have questions. Security teams might be waiting. And he had no idea if Earth would accept the sisters or reject them like so many others had. But they had chosen him, and now he had to choose them as the ship approached the spaceport. A voice came through the comm. Lieutenant Jake Carter. Identify non-human passengers immediately. Jayla squeezed his hand. Jake replied calmly, they're with me. There was a long pause. Understood. The voice replied, colder. Now, when the ship touched down, the hatch opened slowly. Jake stood tall. Wearing his worn jacket, Jayla and Kiri stepped forward with him, both holding his arms proudly. A group of Earth officials waited outside, 6 people, dressed in gray and blue uniforms, behind them. Guards stood with scanners and stun rifles, just in case. One of the officials, woman with sharp eyes, stepped forward. Lieutenant Carter, she said, you've returned. With unexpected passengers, Jake nodded. These are Jayla and Kiri. They're survivors. The woman raised a brow. And you brought them without clearance. They saved my life, Jake said, voice strong, and I saved theirs. The official looked at the sisters. Jayla stared back without fear. Kiri tilted her head, silent but alert. They are not citizens, the woman said. They'll need to be processed, tested, registered, possibly detained. Jake stepped forward, shielding the sisters with his body. They're not criminals, he snapped. They're refugees. And they're under my protection. The guards twitched slightly, unsure whether to act. But the official raised a hand, signaling them to wait. She studied Jake for a moment, then spoke again, more quietly. Why are you risking your future? For them? Jake looked at Jayla and Kiri. Jayla gave him a soft smile. Kiri pressed closer to his arm. Their presence gave him the answer. Because when no one else cared about them, I did, he said. And when I had nothing left, they gave me a reason to live. There was silence. Then, finally, The official nodded once. They'll be watched. But they can stay for now. Jake exhaled slowly. Jayla and Kiri both clutched his arms tighter. They didn't fully understand what was said, but they could feel the change in the air. Later, after the inspection, medical scans, and endless paperwork, Jake brought the sisters to a small housing unit near the outer colony district. It wasn't much, just a few rooms and a view of the forest, but it was quiet, safe. That night, as they sat on the balcony, Kiri looked up at the stars. "So many lights," she whispered. "But I only need 2. Jake smiled. "Which 2? She pointed to him and her sister. "You," she said, and her Jayla sat beside him, her head resting on his shoulder. "You gave us life again," she said softly. "Now we give you future." Jake looked at them both, heart full. He had lost so much: his mission, his ship, maybe even his standing with command. But he had gained something far greater. Not just love, not just purpose, but a new beginning. Days passed, then weeks. People in the district began to accept the strange sisters who spoke gently and walked proudly. Some stared, but no one dared harm them, not with Jake nearby. Rumors spread: 2 alien girls rescued by a lone human, alien royalty hiding in plain sight. Did you hear? They call him Godheart. Jake didn't care about the stories. He just cared about keeping them safe. One evening, Jayla brought him a small carved stone. It had their 3 names etched into it, his in the center, theirs on each side. She handed it to him and said, "In our world, this means family." Jake held it close and replied, "Then that's what we are." The snow may have tried to kill them. The galaxy may have tried to break them, but together, they built something stronger. And when Kiri laughed and leaned into him, and Jayla whispered, "Then we'll go with you, human." Wherever you go, Jake knew, deep in his bones, he would never be alone again.